All right. Today, guys, we are going through the judicial branch. You guys are, pumped up about this. You're excited because you want to learn about the Supreme Court today. Just question is, to start out with, when the... All right. When you guys think the word supreme, what do you think? Because I think like the best of all. Yeah, I do too. And it's too much sour cream. That's exactly what I think. Too much sour cream, Supreme Court. There you go. Okay. First thing, guys, when you deal with the federal courts, number one, you guys have kind of simulated this in the sense when you guys were doing your projects, you realize that there are lower court decisions. Okay. So basically, here's how lower courts work. And as you guys are looking up here, number one, you have federal district courts. Okay, those would be level one for Washington, D.C. courts, like everyone. I think the whole United States here when I say federal courts. But you have 94 district courts. Is the closest one in San Francisco, or is this one actually in Fresno? I forget. They do have ones that roam too. Like literally guys that'll show up and work in a courtroom for a while that are dealing with there. Because usually the federal courts are not dealing with crime, outright crime. You're dealing with something that's involving the Constitution. The reason that you'd get off of your crime or whatever would be because of some constitutional issue or something that dealt with the federal government. At this level, there is one judge. So one judge makes the decision and writes the case in regards to the decision. Okay? Then it goes to the second level, which is the U.S. Court of Appeals. If I remember right, there's 9 districts. I could be wrong. Okay, Mr. Sorensen didn't have it up there. Hears and appeals from the federal district court ruling. So let's say you go to San Francisco, and as you're going to San Francisco, you are, for the district court, it's decided against your favor. You can appeal to the Court of Appeals. They can accept or deny it. But at that point, you are heard by a 3-judge panel, okay? And so this time there are 3 different judges on a district court level. And essentially, like, I know that this also is in San Francisco. They would basically have 3 justices that would listen to you. I also remember Sonia Sotomayor, who's our one of our Supreme Court justices, is there. Their decision can be appealed one more time to the Supreme Court, but most cases, this is the end of the line. I think the Supreme Court gets asked to hear about, I think it's like in the thousands of cases a year, and they will hear about 100. Got it? So there's a lot of them get rejected. Okay. Usually with federal and district courts of appeals, you guys caught this a little bit when you were doing the Supreme Court case. You look at other cases, other federal court or district court or Supreme Court cases, and then you kind of compare the cases. And that ends up being the precedence or the decision will be based off of that. Yes, Jacob? The Supreme Court decides. Yeah, they basically get to decide based off of the issues that are going on there. Is there only one Supreme Court? Yep. Only one case can go on at a time? Yep. So like how many cases a year do you do? It's about 100. And then most of their time isn't actually spent in deliberations. Like the court cases in the Supreme Court are hour, 2 hours long as far as the hearings, but they spend a lot of time reading and their assistants read. And so they end up, it's all based off of briefings. The other court cases have written out long explanations, and then they go and read through those. Then they make a decision themselves and then write up their own response in regards to those things. I remember because I read through, you can look up online, like they have the Supreme Court, like all the cases are in written form. I mean, it takes like an hour maybe to read a Supreme Court case. Probably would be, like, we had more time, it would probably be something we could find that you could do. You could see who actually speaks and those things. But that's the other thing that was different on your guys' cases, is like you're representing and arguing with each other. It's actually the justices that you talk to and talk with. Got it? You're going, hey, like Sonia Sotomayor might stop you and do the things that are going on there. I was wrong. There's 11 districts. Gosh darn it. Okay. There you go. That's not Pan Am, dude. This is where the Supreme Court is. This is not, what was it? You're like, where's District 13? It's Canada. That's what it is. District 13 is Canada. Anyhow, there you go. And District 12 obviously got destroyed, so there you go. Never mind. Okay. To Canada. Of course, Canada would be the place of freedom. This is just where the district courts are. It's based by and large on population. I know there's been complaints because this one's too large because California's population would be like bigger than, say, these 5 states combined. Got it? Or whatever it is. Okay? All right. The U.S. Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. It's the court of last resort, means there's no higher court to appeal to. Once the Supreme Court makes the decision, it is a final decision, unless the Supreme Court decides to change it, which has happened. Yep. I don't even know. I only know like the African National Court, like those types of things are put into place because they don't trust the African governments themselves. Got it? Does that make sense? Yeah, there is. But it would be deciding between nations. This is where like also like federal courts, like when they do crimes, it has to be like multi-state. So it'd be like something where like a mob boss is located everywhere. The most famous federal case that I can think of in terms of criminals is Michael Vick. Because Michael Vick got convicted of organizing a dog-fighting conspiracy ring, not just dog-fighting. Got it? If he'd just been dog-fighting, he'd have been sent to, do, public service for 6 months. You know what I mean? Like he would have been put in jail. But he organized a massive ring. And so he actually was heard at a federal district court level, and the FBI actually convicted him there. Got it? The FBI doesn't do that unless they know they're going to get a win. They're not going to, otherwise they'll leave it at the lower courts. Okay? So once you have made it to the Supreme Court, there's nowhere else to go. They can hear criminal cases, but they never do. Got it? So they would never actually hear the crime of the century would never go in front of the Supreme Court. The only thing that I could say that would happen would probably be if it was like the president. Even that though, the president, I'll say it this way, when Bill Clinton was subpoenaed to testify about something that happened in his Arkansas, it was something that happened in his Arkansas things, and he had some corruption down there. And then they asked him under oath whether or not he'd had an affair with certain women. He said no, he was lying. That was what he got in trouble for. That could have been heard at the Supreme Court, but even that, I think, would still be heard at lower courts. The state of Arkansas is the one that needed to convict him of perjury. Does that make sense? Or of, lying under oath. Got it? You go to jail if you lie under oath? You could, in the right circumstances. Just remember, again, I'm the guy who convicted someone of misdemeanor vandalism for writing with children's chalk. It was where he was located. So it all depends on the nature of the crime, right? And so, and then the nature of, I'll even say how hard you push it. If you lie under oath and then don't confess, right? You're more likely to go to jail than if you go, yes, I did lie under oath, and then the consequences are less. All right. Also, if you're covering for someone or not, or if you're under threat, or if you're you could think why people would lie under oath. Again, I think we just said this, but it picks the cases. The Supreme Court decides which cases they're going to hear and which ones they're not going to hear. All right. All right. Supreme Court.
Holy moly.
Holy moly.
That's a lot. Have you seen this show? Holy moly. Yeah. It's like a mini show. Oh, yeah. It was like 7th grade.
Abe, you need to write down every last bit of this, okay, Abe? I'm just telling you. Okay. All right. Supreme Court is established by Article 3 of the Constitution. Guys, you only need to write that down if you don't remember it's Article 3. Okay? Remember, leg, say, or. Got it? The power of the judicial review, this is probably the most important line on this thing, is what they have that kind of functions within their, I'll say, the 3 branches of government, to correct the government, to work with the government. It's cemented by the case Marbury versus Madison. Marbury is a government official appointed by, John Adams as in the State Department, which was run by James Madison, a future president at the time. Marbury was basically appointed by the other party, by the Federalists, by John Adams, to be in an appointment in the State Department. James Madison, of course, fired him because he was from the wrong party. Everyone got it there? He was saying because he was appointed, he had the right to hold that position. And there was money tied to it, all those sorts of things. And so he demanded that he be heard because he was a State Department official at the Supreme Court, using a law that had been written, okay, sort of idea. When he did that, he went in front of the head of the Supreme Court at the time was the famous John Marshall. And John Marshall said, because you're basing your argument on an unconstitutional law, I'm overturning this case. And so Marbury was never put into his position. Got it there. Article 3, well, Article 3 is just in the Constitution where it is.
Why is it established in Article 3 of the Constitution? What is established in Article 3?
The Supreme Court. Yeah. And here's what this means. That at this point, the Supreme Court had the power to decide amongst all the laws which ones are constitutional, which ones are not. This is judicial review. So like when you guys are looking at the TLO case, they're deciding constitutionality of that action of going through that girl's locker, purse, all that sort of stuff. They decided that it did fit within the realm of the Constitution because the girl was a minor and because they're at a public area, public school. Everyone got it there? Just like you guys give up your rights not to be searched if you go to on an airplane. Got it? And so that happens, well, you guys are still minors, so I can still search all your stuff, and you're out of school. Hey, let's just all dump out our backpacks right now. Never mind. Okay. The basic idea is you guys are, judicial review is probably the largest power given to any individual person in the government. Now, 9 people have control of that, but think, guys, judicial review set the way for abortion to start. It set the way to end segregation. It's been whole society-changing decisions that are often made at the Supreme Court.
Judicial review is the largest power given to the government?
I think to any individual power of government. Like when you stop and think about it, in those 9 people, sometimes 5 people's decisions rides whether or not abortion happens, whether or not, if that makes sense. Okay? Only way for the Supreme Court decision is the Supreme Court overturns itself later. I think I talked about it already. There are 9 justices, though that's not set by the Constitution. In fact, originally there was only 4, I think, or maybe it was 5. They had to ride around everywhere, so it was really hard on your life when everyone comes to Washington, D.C., they would have to ride to different locations. And that's why John Jay, the first Supreme Court justice, quit, because it got too hard on him as he got older. The Chief Justice has the same voting power, but has power of choosing which cases the court hears and leads the discussion between the justices who write the court decisions. So just think of it this way. Half their time is spent hearing cases. The other half of the time they're in a room, the 9 of them together, and they're discussing all the cases that they heard. And they're making the decisions based off of them. And then, of course, swears in the president. You got it? It was. So one of the more famous, I'll say, historical things involving the Supreme Court was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, got a little bit sick of the justices overthrowing his New Deal actions. And so they kept ruling them as judicial review. They were stopping him from growing the size of the government. They're mostly conservative. And so he tried to increase the size of the Supreme Court so he could just appoint 5 more justices that would side with him. Got it? And everyone ripped FDR because he was grabbing too much power and blaming him of fascist movements, say like Hitler or Mussolini were doing at the time. And then, and so he got rejected for doing that. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
Who controls the president?
Who controls it? The Illuminati.
Okay. And then, is there stuff the president can or can't say? Like when he's speaking?
No, there's nothing. I'll say the president should have. He is supposed to be a private citizen. Just I'm joking about the Illuminati. He's supposed to be a private citizen. And, well, you're kind of looking at Biden or maybe even Trump, and you're going who tells Trump what to do? If Trump was president, you'd say nobody tells him what to do. Trump thinks on his own, right? Now, that's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a private citizen thinking for themselves. When you're looking at Biden, and it's kind of understandably, here's this guy who's been a career politician, and he's kind of holding to the company line, everyone thinks. But it's supposed to be a private citizen making the decisions. Got it? And even think of it in a war, he's the chief of state or the commander-in-chief. He's personally making the decision. He's not supposed to be overly influenced. I like it better sometimes when you have an independent thinker, more so than someone that's a party guy like Biden. So at a certain level, Obama, just being fair, Obama was not a party guy. He was more seen as an independent thinker that was coming in without the experience. So it's not really what I'm saying. There's not really a party issue. It's if they say something that has consequences, right? So if Trump tweets, right? Nothing. I'm just meaning it has consequences for the society. If Trump tweets out, "You're an idiot," then half the world thinks you're an idiot, right? Does that make sense? And that becomes an issue. Jacob? The only secret thing that's been described is, the only secret thing that I'm listening to about presidents that's been described is the process of dropping a nuke on someone. And so think they're given a code and I think it's a briefcase, if I remember right, that has all the information on how to drop a nuke. Yeah. But no, I heard it described from Eisenhower dropped to Kennedy. Sorry, did I do that right? Yeah, to Kennedy. And I also heard how it was described given from Jimmy Carter to Reagan, who had polar opposite views of that, issue. Like, oh, I don't even know. All right, here's how their bench looks. You can see the 9 chairs there. If you're in the council there, you're talking up to them, and then they're coming back to you. It has a small viewing area, which I think you have to get. It's not like it costs to get in, but you have to have permission to go in. It is not something that is just open to the public and engages the things that are going on there. Here we go, guys. Back to writing, because you guys are all distracted by pictures. The Supreme Court is asked to hear about 7,000 cases a year. And then I said that wrong. It was 7,000 cases a year. And then they hear 100. Okay? And they only hear cases from October to April. And then they start making all the decisions. They start writing out all the decisions. Got it? And so there's a season where they're asked. And then there's a season when they're writing them out. And then everything's done by June, and then July and August are usually, July, August, and September are usually quieter months where not much is going on, okay? Here, yeah, I was right on this. It's 1 hour time period to be heard, a case. So realize every single case, it's given 1 hour. Yeah.
What was the case where it went for something amount of days or hours? Because it was no one wanted to talk to anyone.
The only case I know where somebody drug it out at the Supreme Court was the Amistad case with John Quincy Adams hearing the side, but that was a case of a former president and a House of Representative holding the mic as the lawyer. He just talked for 8 hours. Yeah. The Amistad was a weird slave case where John Quincy Adams was anti-slavery before it was cool to be anti-slavery. Okay, and he basically stood up in front of the Supreme Court and made all the arguments why the Supreme Court should be anti-slavery from the beginning all the way to the end. In argument, what the Amistad was the slaves took over the ship and no one knew what to do with them because were they their own independent? There was no country attached to them. The Spanish wanted their money back. The Caribbean wanted money. Everyone was trying to figure out how to get them, and they finally ruled them as free individuals that got to go back to Africa. Got it? And so that's the only time I know where a Supreme Court case got held over. But I think in the olden days it used to a lot. I think right now they just control the time. You have an hour. If you can't say it in an hour, they're doing it there. And again, it's mainly done by briefing. They do it by reading. They read the old cases. They read the other stuff. and they read the argument. It's not. It's clear. It's all of it is clarifying, and because it's very like thing it's already been decided on twice. All they're trying to do is going, why would I try to overturn the district court level, or why would I try to overturn the Court of Appeals level? They're not hearing things that are going on. And then, as I said before, I think you have to get a ticket, but the oral arguments can be heard by the public. Yep. All right. From there, at least one justice has to write a majority opinion. Okay, so there's two opinions. There's the losing side. You'll see on the case, like it'll be like this, 6-3. Got it? And when you see that, you know the majority won. They decided for the case or against the case. And when you think about it, what happens is one of the justices from the winning side, sometimes they'll combine and two people write it, but they'll write the majority of the case, and then the minority of the case, the rest of them will also write a dissenting opinion. So like when you hit like a landmark case, which if we had more time, I'd do a couple of those. Say like I'll think one of the famous ones is what's his name? It's a great name. Dred Scott. Dred Scott is a slave whose owner died in Illinois when he was in a free state. And then he was getting sent back as property into the South to someone that he didn't even know, like some distant relative that had inherited him. And the majority decision entirely talked about comparing slaves to products. Like just, it was straight like the value of a cow versus the value of a slave. In the minority decision, they were that was against it. They were describing about all men being free and human. And so you end up like, you can compare a lot of those and see how attitudes have changed towards, say, slavery. That would never happen today in slavery. But also versus the minority decisions, which we'll see that will have why they're defending this case against decisions that are going on there. Okay, so again, if you had more time, you'd be reading through they're not very long, a minority or majority of decision of some famous case, and you'd be kind of like just like simply like presenting what were their arguments. It's basically a summary of their arguments. You can kind of picture it with your own cases. Okay. All right. This is where, like, I can't remember if I'll need to ask Mr. Sorensen if we're doing do you need it for test sake? No, the justices. But to me, this is kind of the interesting part of who they are. They're basically Justice Roberts is the Chief Justice. He has been on the court. He was appointed by George W. Bush. Justice Thomas was appointed by George Herbert Walker Bush and is the oldest justice. That's why he's number 2. So he's like 75. What? So Alito was appointed by George W. Bush and has been on the court, for many years. Sotomayor and Kagan were appointed by Obama. So it's just like all the numbers are is how long they've been on the court, who's been on the longest, or whatever it may be. Gorsuch is Trump, Kavanaugh is Trump, Barrett is Trump, Jackson is Biden. Got it? And then you have the clerk of the court, someone writing it down, the marshal of the court, that would be the police officer, right? And then the counsel. No, Kavanaugh was the guy that got in trouble because, like, last minute, somebody came in and said that he had, sexually abused them, 50 years ago, 30 years ago. The chick is Barrett. The chick is Barrett. You got me to say that, didn't you, online? The girl is Barrett, yes. Yeah. So, and then eventually think when Roberts retires, then the president will get to decide a new head of the court, new chief of justice. Sure. Got it? Does that make sense? And so the chief justice is, I don't think, Roberts still got another 10 years at least. Thomas will be the next one to retire. These guys all are relatively young. All of them, really, to be honest with you. I think the majority of this court is still on here for 10 years, except for Thomas. So, the president.
If Robert goes away, then Justice Thomas will be the new chief
No, the Biden would pick, and he'd pick one of the liberals, which are Sotomayor, Kagan, or Jackson. My guess is he would pick Jackson because then she could have power over the court the longest, just judging by her age.
Biden always pick, or like Jackson?
The president always picks.
But what happens if Thomas retires? Do they all move up?
Yes, they'll all move up a seat.
So he just gets to pick Chief
Yep.
Justice.
Yep.
So did Biden pick Robert?
No. Roberts was picked by George W. Bush. The Chief Justice at the time, Rehnquist, retired, and George W. Bush put in Roberts, his first appointee. Someone else had retired earlier, and then he became the justice. So just, guys, the big one here, Barrett, why Barrett was such a big deal, okay, was the retiring justice was, I'm going to forget her name, Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was liberal, a feminist, and had been on that side of it. Well, what Trump did was flip that seat like 3 months before the election to somebody that was conservative. Got it? And a female. But the basic idea was the court, if you didn't catch this, is Republican appointed, Republican appointed, Republican appointed, Republican appointed, Republican appointed, Republican appointed, and then 3 Democrat appointed. All right. Let's finish this up on Monday. All right, we'll finish up on Monday because I think I'm running out of stuff.